Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Program will begin in 5 minutes, so please begin moving to your seats and help us start on schedule. As a reminder, please silence your electronic devices and leave them on so you can text or email your questions for our guest speakers to the address on the screen, askmetna@gmail.com. Thank you.
The Signal and Cyber Museum Society is on a mission to preserve the rich history and significant contributions of Americans who have and do serve at Fort Eisenhower in the Signal Regiment and the Army's Cyber Corps. Now, more than ever, we must save these stories to educate the public, train present-day soldiers, and inspire future generations. Your support is vital to preserve this 160-year-old history and prepare young Americans for service in the 21st century. Visit secureourstory.org to learn more and join us in keeping our nation's legacy. Together, we can ensure our history lives on.
Ladies and gentlemen, please move to your seats. We will begin momentarily. Please welcome to the stage Colonel Mike Black, U.S. Air Force retired Vice President for Defense, AFCEA International.
All right, for those that didn't recognize the song, it's Rip It Up, Little Richard. All right, so rip it up, come on, get excited here. This is this afternoon's session. Now, before we begin, I'd like to highlight an upcoming AFCEA event. AFCEA International and AFCEA Europe are hosting on the December 4th and 5th in Frankfurt, Germany. It's called TechNet Transatlantic, and it's going to focus on opportunities for innovation, collaboration between the U.S. and Europe to achieve effectiveness in C4ISR and cyber. Now, I know you're probably wondering, why is an Air Force guy up here introducing somebody from the 18th Airborne Corps? Well, I do have ties with the Army. My dad was in the Army. We actually were stationed at what was Fort Bragg, but Fort Liberty. I lived on 15 Nijmegen Street. And I'm also a graduate of the 34-foot trolley course there, and about 50 years ago. And I've got the certificate to prove it. It's in my pics here if you don't believe me. But General Cogbill, he was commissioned as an infantry officer after graduating from United States Military Academy in 1994. He's a veteran of multiple deployments, to include Iraq, Kosovo, and Afghanistan. He's also deployed to Haiti as a UN peacekeeper early in his career. And then following an assignment as a Deputy Director for Operations at United States Central Command, he was assigned to the 18th Airborne Corps in June of this year, where he currently serves as the Deputy Commanding General. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to General Cogbill to the stage.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate the introduction, but I specifically asked for Lose Yourself by Eminem. So maybe we can try that one more time, just kind of get the crowd going after lunch. No, but thank you. It's great to be here. It's my first TechNet. It's good to see some friendly faces, teammates, CEOs, members of industry, technologists, and even one of my mentors, General Janik, sitting in the front row, who came up right before I walked up and threatened me not to embarrass him and embarrass the family. So, sir, I hope I don't embarrass you. But I do have a spoiler alert before I get started for the group. I am not a technologist. I am not a digital native. I'm not a signaleer. I'm not a cyber warrior. I don't know much about acquisitions. And I have no money. So if any of you want to get up now and leave, that's just the reality. We're an operational unit, a warfighting headquarters. We focus on O&M dollars. We'll take some of those $6.4 I learned about this morning from General Ellis, if you got some to give. But we have no money, but we do specialize in warfighting, and that's why we're here. I will tell you, though, I love this community. I love a group of individuals that are so intellectually curious, people that are risk takers, that have a bias for action, and want to get out and solve problems. In fact, you're so good at solving problems, I think sometimes you run out of problems to solve, and then that's where we come in as the operational unit. We have lots of problems, and I have access to all the people who own the problems. And so it's a perfect marriage. It's symbiotic, and I look forward to talking to you about it, at least from the 18th Airborne Corps perspective. And really, if I could get the slide up there, this is about data-centric warfare and the Corps' journey towards a CJAD-C2P solution. And notice I said CJAD-C2P because that's to remind us of the importance of partners. So our allies and partners, they have to be at the forefront of our mind when we go down this road. And I see some of our partners in the audience today, so thank you for being here. But this is our journey, and it's not just a journey, because truly, you go out on a journey like we're going to this afternoon to go back to Fort Liberty. We're going to put it into ways, and we're going to arrive at our destination. This is different because we'll never truly arrive at a destination. So it's more that we're tracking on a North Star. And I like to think of this, instead of a straight line journey, I think of this more like an expedition, like we're climbing a mountain, because it seems like everything we do is uphill, and we've got really heavy rucksacks, and it's dangerous, and there's weather, and we can't do it by ourselves, all right? We need the Sherpas to help us get to the top of that mountain. And then just when we think we got to the top of the mountain, we get there and we look around, we pat ourselves on the back, and then we look up and we see another hilltop. We see another ridge line, and we get back after it. And we just keep going. And that's what we've done in the 18th Airborne Corps through our exercises. And I'll talk more about this, but that's been our experience to date. And just a disclaimer too, I talked about operational experimentation. Nobody get concerned. It's about building warfighting readiness. We're not into the modernization business. Modernization is handled by the Army Modernization Enterprise, and they do a fantastic job. And they're looking deeper. There's some things we're doing today, like this week, like right now with 2101, Transformation and Contact. General Donahue just got back from the box. Our Command Sergeant Majors down there, you heard others talk about it. General Morrison gave a really impactful vignette of what's going on down there, and I applaud all of that. But what we're doing is different. We're going after CJAD C2P, and we're going after a tool that we can fight tonight with. It's not something that we can fight in 2027 or 2035. This is tools that we not only need to fight tonight, but we're fighting with right now, both at the 18th Airborne Corps and at CENTCOM. So hopefully what we're doing, and the intent all along, has been that through our operational experimentation and our tactical level innovation, our learning is informing and de-risking programmatic decisions at the service level, at the joint level, combatant command level, to the DoD. And that's really, that's our value proposition. But this is a story of visionary commanders, and I've worked with several. Relentless operators, rapid iteration, embedded engineers sitting right next to the operators in our JOCs, our TOCs, our MOCs, our KOCs, and then validated learning, and a lot of failing, all right, because failing equals learning if you have the right culture in your organization. If you know how to take that feedback, dust yourself off, get back and back on the horse and try again. And that's really what we've been trying to do. But I'll tell you, this is not just an 18th Airborne Corps story. This is all of our story. Everybody in this room, even people not in this room, because it truly takes an ecosystem to do what we've been doing since 2020, really, at least in my experience, but probably longer than that. But since 2020, this is a story of a bunch of people coming together, people from industry, people from academia, people from the interagency, from the intel community, from folks like the Chief Digital AI Office, and others. So this is, and more important, I think, for our viability in application of these tools is the combatant commands. And as you know, or if you don't know, the 18th Airborne Corps is America's contingency corps, which means we have to be able to deploy, fight, win anywhere in the world with any COCOM at any time against any foe. And so implied in that task is when you show up, you're interoperable. And in today's day and age, we know that interoperable doesn't just mean that we know the same battle drills or we employ the same doctrine. It means we can pass data to each other. We can communicate. We can have a common operational picture. We can have a common intel picture. Well, I just finished a professional military education course last week, and we had the opportunity to listen to Mr. John Kirby, who you all probably know who I'm talking about. He's a great communicator, and he gets paid a lot of money to communicate. And he says, all that stuff is great, but he said, really, you just have to deliver 3 things to your audience, because that's, as human beings, that's all we're really going to grasp. That's all we can retain or have the attention span to take away from any talk, no matter how short or how long it is. So my 3 things for you are this. 1, culture. 2, calisthenics. And 3, catalysts. All right, and by culture, I mean you can't start to innovate unless you invest in your people and you get the culture inside of your organization right. And I'll talk more about that. Calisthenics, all right? I said we specialize, our comparative advantage is warfighting readiness. In order to do that, you got to get your reps and sets. That's what training is about. You do it again, you do it again, you do it until you're blue in the face, and then you do it so you can do it under any conditions anywhere in the world. And then lastly is catalyst, okay? Sometimes you need that accelerant to move you forward, to move at the speed of war. And that's, a lot of times, those catalysts come in the form of crisis. And as America's Contingency Corps, we specialize in those. We've had ample opportunity to go out and try and solve problems on behalf of the Joint Force. So I'm honored to have this opportunity to talk to you. If we go to the next slide, please. So I talked about vision. I talked about visionary commanders. So the first one, when I was the Chief of Staff of the 18th Airborne Corps, it was Lieutenant General, then Lieutenant General Eric Kurilla. And he had a simple task. He said, all right, I know we're America's Contingency Corps, and we're supposed to be able to do all those things that I just talked about, but he goes, take this. I want to be the first AI-enabled corps in the United States Army. Figure it out, okay? And so pretty broad guidance, but you can see that, current state over there on the left, desired state on the right. And in order to do that, knowing that you'll never truly achieve that to the level that you would want to, he developed these 4 lines of effort. And the first is starting with culture. All right? You have to be able to draw out the best in your people. You have to be able to unlock the potential inside of a rifle squad, inside of a staff directorate, inside of a division, at whatever echelon it is. People have to believe that they are part of this solution, because we don't need a bunch of problem identifiers. We need a bunch of problem solvers getting after it at every level of our formation. And so how do you do that? One of the things that General Carrillo started was a Shark Tank-like competition called the Dragon's Lair, where he would put out an invite to folks from across the 18th Airborne Corps, eventually to other commands as well, but in the 18th Airborne Corps, to come with solutions to problems that are bugging you in your unit, whether it's in a motor pool, whether it's in a headquarters, whether it's out in the field and you can't carry your ammunition or your rucksack doesn't fit right. Put out an open call. They come in. We had a distinguished panel of experts from industry, academia, you name it, senior leaders from the Army. And then they got to pitch. They did their elevator pitch, and then the winners were selected, and then actually got priority for funding to develop prototypes. And I'm not talking about, here's your program or record. I'm talking about, here's some fun money for you to go and try and build something a little bit more advanced than what you have. And then really to bring in partners like Army Research Labs and the Catalyst Pathfinder program that have funds that can be used for that type of iteration and prototyping. So that kind of built some momentum. That got people excited. They knew that the commander cared and wanted to listen to them. So to give them a place to come together, but they said, well, how do we do it? Where do we go to innovate? So we gave them we set up these innovation outposts at each of the divisions. The first one being at the 101st Airborne Division with the Eagle Works. Then the 82nd Airborne Division at the Airborne Innovation Outpost. 3rd ID built their own, and then now 10th Mountain has one as well. So across the Corps, and then we've got our 7 separate brigades that also innovate, but they can come to one of these places to get together, to iterate, to ideate, to curate problems, and to prototype, and then to take them back to their chain of command. You can't do that by yourself because, remember what I mentioned up front, we don't have money to innovate, okay? So we have to get creative. We have to find partners, university partners. Every division in the 18th Airborne Corps has one, if not multiple, university partners. They are always looking. They have tons of brilliant people looking to solve hard problems. They have great laboratories. They're willing to come to you to see how soldiers live. And these folks come in, and then working through our Army Modernization Enterprise, DevCom, ARL, Catalyst, Pathfinder, and others, we're able to kind of build these facilities in underutilized structures on the installation to give a meeting place, a confluence for our soldiers to come together and iterate. The next is a data literate workforce. So in today's day and age, we all have to be able to speak the same language. And that means from the commanding general, command sergeant major, down to the private and the rifle squad, we have to all be talking about the same stuff, using the same language, and that doesn't just happen naturally. And normally when you think about education, you think, well, the most senior person in the organization is the most educated. Not with data, okay? It's inverse. So our young privates, sergeants, captains, lieutenants, they are the digital natives. They are the ones that are very comfortable with tech. They're the ones that code in their free time. They have their Raspberry Pis and they do things like that. They get together, whether it's for gaming or for some other purpose, but they are very comfortable with the tech. But it's more of our mid-level officers and NCOs that we got to start to teach that new language. And again, we can't do that by ourselves. We've reached out to our university partners. We've reached out to West Point and their Data 101 course. We've advocated to get it into our professional military education. We've worked with Joint Special Operations Command. We've sent folks off to the Tron boot camp, data boot camps, et cetera. There are multiple things, but now it's officially part of the 18th Airborne Corps onboarding process. So when you come to the Corps, you're going to get not just kind of what the Corps does and how we operate and what our mission is, but you're going to get some basic data literacy, whether you want it or not. Data governance and management. So we all know, everybody in this room understands the importance of data. It's a strategic asset, but it doesn't just happen naturally. People have data stored in their personal folders on their desktops. It's typically not clean data. We don't know if it's the right data. We don't know where it exists. So you have to kind of bring some organization to how you handle data. We've had great partners, and you heard Network CFT, you heard C3T talk this morning, and others to talk about data standards, CIO, CDO. We have a CDO at the 18th Airborne Corps now. All of our divisions, not all of our divisions have CDOs, but if you look across the commands, this CTOs, one of whom is seated, our new CTO, Rob Braun, is seated here in the audience with us. He also volunteered to take all technical questions because that's in his duty description. But we have a chief data officer to keep us always thinking about data to make sure we're doing it correctly. And then for AI-enabled infrastructure, if you want to use AI machine learning, you've got to have cloud. All right? You've got to be able to access all that data, get it off of your desktop, get it into the cloud so that you can start to run algorithms and test it out and shake it out. ECMO was one of our very first partners that came in and helped us with C-Cloud, or yeah, I think that's what it was called. That would be redundant, that'd be 2 Cs. But the early instance of cloud, and that gave us the ability to use it in the headquarters. And now, you know, I've learned a lot about cloud, and I won't start talking about cloud because I'll quickly embarrass myself. But that's all, those are the foundations. Now, so that's kind of your culture piece. That takes time, all right? So the commander can put out a vision, but the unit, everybody in that unit has to own that culture, and it has to be part of your DNA. When I get down to the bottom of this slide, if you can see it, it's kind of small, but it's symbolic. This is where we get into the calisthenics. This is the discipline application of the technology in exercises or real-world contingencies in order to advance the learning. And our system started in 2020. It's called the Scarlet Dragon exercise. This was initially just a fires exercise using broad area surveillance targeting. So being able to ingest data, run some AI machine learning on it to identify potential targets, and then digitally pass those targets to a shooter, thereby shortening a kill chain. You've heard of so we're using Maven Smart System. That's our tool right now because that's what we have. It's about a C+, but it's working. Happy to use anything that anybody in this room can find that works better. But that's what, it was very narrowly scoped mission. And really, you ask, well, why was that so important to General Kurilla? Well, as a new Corps commander, getting ready to do a warfighter and kind of understanding his role as the warfighting headquarters and understanding the capabilities of his 18th Fires Brigade, he's like, wow, the range has really increased on our long-range shooters. I have to be able to do deep sensing and deep targeting. My battle space is 90 kilometers long. Like, there aren't enough MQ-9s or National Technical Means to help me see my entire battle space. And even if I could, there's not enough PED, not enough soldiers in uniform to go out there and look at those screens or look at that data and look for targets, all right, look for opportunities. And so this was innovation with purpose, innovation out of necessity. And it's only getting worse because there's so much more data and so much more collection. It's ubiquitous ISR. How do you make sense of it all? So we're always looking for the capability to sense, but how do you make sense? And that's where the AI and ML comes in. And then you have to be able to act. You got to be able to make a decision faster than your adversary. So if you start there on the left, the very first Scarlet Dragon, that's 18th Airborne Corps. Our first partner was 2MEF, so out of Camp Lejeune, a Marine Expeditionary Force, inherently joint. They were also interested in shortening kill chains, and conveniently, we were all in the state of North Carolina. So kind of a grassroots training opportunity. They had some units in the field. We wanted to pass data, and that's what we did. Narrowly defined, narrowly scoped. We said we want to ingest not just NTM, but because there's not enough NTM to go around, we're going to use commercial satellite imagery. We're going to use commercial satellite imagery, pull that data into the inference harness, run this very simple algorithm, our BAST-T, identify a threat, which this threat in this case was a inflatable tank sitting out in the middle of the Fort Bragg training area. We're going to identify that thing. We're going to pass the target data back to our AFATEDS machine, which is our firing machine, send it to a shooter, which was a HIMARS, and then put an ATACM on top of that decoy. That whole process, here we are, shortening a kill chain. Good job. We did a digital target pass, 743 minutes. So that's like 10 to 11 hours. That's not going to win the next war, okay? That's like an F. But we were starting with nothing. So that's where we started from. If you work your way all the way to the right side of that thing, we are digitally passing targets in under a minute right now, okay? And this is because of the rapid iteration and the multiple touches that we've had. So if you look there, and because I can't see, oh, there it is, because it's too small. I said this is symbolic. It's every 90 to 120 days, unless there's a deployment or a major contingency that we deploy in support of. But like I said, the learning doesn't stop there. But what you can see there is you'll see an Army patch, a Marine Corps patch, and usually some sort of Air Force patch because they just happen to be conveniently located right there at Fort Liberty with us. But for the first 3 iterations, it was kind of us just figuring out these tools and how to do data-centric warfighting, digital target passes. Scarlet Dragon 4, we added the Coast Guard because we wanted to take advantage of the Mid-Atlantic EW range, and we said, this has got to be truly joint. The Navy was too busy at that time to play, so we used the Coast Guard, and we put emitters on the Coast Guard ships, and then they replicated enemy forces doing some sort of assault, amphibious assault. So we're building tactical scenarios to support the hardware that was already in the area. This is not a sanctioned exercise by the Army, by the Joint Force. This is come as you are. It's a pickup game, and we're having to leverage existing assets and units that share that common vision of wanting to train and wanting to get better. So we were kind of capping out about as where we could in that training environment, and it was exciting, and we were making there was a lot of learning. Every 90 days we're pulling together industry, we're doing an industry day, working through some very creative acquisition techniques using CRADAs and OTAs and TIAs and PIAs and all these other things that I don't really understand, but it was all integrated, and people came together, and we gave everybody a chance, and we said we're going to test these algorithms every 90 days and see how much improvement we can find. But then we kind of capped out a little bit, and lo and behold, Vladimir Putin decides he's going to invade Ukraine. So who do they call? They call the 18th Airborne Corps. We pack our stuff. We head to Wiesbaden. And you'll see that there with the Yukon patch. So from January, February of 22 through October, the Corps went forward and then basically conducted a train, advise, assist mission for the Ukrainians from Germany. So as you recall, guidance was don't start a war with Russia in Ukraine, which means you're not going inside of Ukraine, but we still need you to help them. So this is a non-NATO partner, and they are in the process of defending themselves against the Russian hordes, as you're all very aware. This is still going on today. And our job was to build shared understanding with this non-NATO partner, which looks and smells a lot like intelligence, but understanding, and then be able to pass them points of interest. Hey, you might want to take a look at this. This might be in your best interest. Well, how do you do that off of U.S. SIPR when you have a non-NATO partner? Now, we have a history of training Ukrainians, but you can't do it digitally, you can't do it at speed, and you can't do it at scale. And that was an opportunity where you talk about, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but those catalyst situations where it really accelerates the learning, it accelerates authorities and all the other things that come with it, where we were able to do this in record time to go from a U.S. secret system that our Maven Smart system that we're using on U.S. secret through a cross-domain solution to a Ukrainian proprietary system that they were using on the front lines out in the Donbass. So really interesting stuff. There's a good paper that just came out from the Center for Security and Emerging Technologies that you could potentially take a look at if you want to learn more about it. It was written by Georgetown and Johns Hopkins. So we come back from that, a couple more exercises, joint exercises. But then right after that, if you look in January, February 23, you see the CENTCOM patch. So General Kurilla now at CENTCOM says, hey, we're going to transform this headquarters to a data-centric warfighting headquarters that will enable decision advantage in a multi-domain, multi-partner environment. And he said, hey, Cogbill, you're going to figure this out, okay? You're my new DJ3, fresh from the 18th Airborne Corps. And unfortunately, nobody in the headquarters really understood what Maven was, because they just, unless you got pulled that giant sucking sound from Fort Liberty down to Tampa, which is not a bad place to be brought, you probably weren't too proficient in it. So we figured it out. And so strategically, the CENTCOM partnered with the 18th Airborne Corps into one of their Scarlet Dragon exercises. We threw an O on it and made it OASIS for CENTCOM, but that really drove the learning in the headquarters. But it also gave us an introduction to the CDAO and the GUIDE exercises, the Global Information Dominance Experiments, which all of a sudden we're looking up from the JTF perspective at the Corps, and we're looking horizontally at all the other COCOMs that are participating, and we're realizing, hey, we're starting to see the gaps between COCOMs, and we're also starting to see the opportunity in terms of vertical integration and being able to pass a target, like a STAR target, from a JTF all the way up to the Joint Staff, to the SecDef, or to the President. That's what CDAO brought. Oh, by the way, they also brought money. Okay, because they were paying for these exercises, and they wanted us to continue the learning, both at CENTCOM and 18th Airborne Corps, and so we were able to continue and keep our licensing so that we could do these iterations. So that continues and continues today. You'll see the flags on there: UK flag, Canada, Finland, with our dynamic front exercise. So it's a NATO exercise. We're participating, working the digital target passing, working data interoperability with partners. But again, those are our calisthenics every 90 to 120 days, whether you need it or not, so that we can get those reps and sets. If we can go to the next slide. All right, I talked about Catalyst, and this is kind of where we've been since 2021. You remember in August 2021, the HKIA evacuation, the Kabul International Airport. It was a bit chaotic, to say the least. And they were looking to the 18th Airborne Corps. CENTCOM was like, we need some assistance bringing some calm to the chaos here. What tools do you have? Now, they had a U.S. Forces Forward headquarters that deployed to HKIA under Rear Admiral Pete Vaisley. We eventually pushed out the 82nd Airborne Division to augment the Marine Corps Task Force 51-5. And together, they worked through this problem. But at the Corps level, we were very much interested in using our tools to help make sense of this, to create a common operational picture, create a common intel picture, but then also be able to use the AI and the ML to identify threats in and around the Kabul Bowl, to be able to see this, and then to be able to communicate risk to the chairman, to the CENTCOM commander. And to do that, it's really hard to do that without live data. You can't do that on a placemat that goes through 15 staff officers in multiple versions and gets up to the desk of the chairman and say, look, we think there's a problem at Abbey Gate or at this gate or on this hilltop or whatever. Long story short, General Milley, that was the first time he put Maven on his desktop and kept it there. And to this day, the chairman still keeps Maven on his desktop because that is a tool that he has at his disposal. It flattens the organization. General Kurilla didn't have to spend time explaining what's happening on the ground to anybody because they could look at it and see it in real time. Live feeds. They could see an MQ-9 circling over top of Bagram Air Base, and they can click that MQ-9 and you can watch the live feed and see what's happening through that soda straw. So that's just one example of how we started. But there was still so much, it was still very much kind of more like the old Project Maven, a little bit of COP, a little bit of SIP. We weren't doing any fires. We were trying to keep track of aircraft so we could see, through the live feeds, we can see aircraft coming in. We could have an understanding as they started to flush, but that was kind of just the beginning. If you go to the next scenario, Ukraine, I'm sorry, go back, just the next picture. Ukraine, I already talked about Ukraine and what we did there. I don't need to belabor that point, and I thought General Ellis did a good job explaining that this morning. Swift response, that's an ongoing series of exercises, been going on since probably 2015, if not longer than that. It's 82nd Airborne, but it's joint forcible entry missions. It's tactical. It's usually a brigade below, battalion and below, but we're working through partner interoperability there at that level, and there's a lot of great discussion about what that looks like, upper TI, lower TI, and how we're working through a unified network to have interoperability, one with ourselves and two with our partners. So just another opportunity to learn planning support to Indo-PACOM, obviously with all the national defense strategy priorities, understanding the importance of that region, understanding the need to be prepared to execute an O plan if called in the Indo-PACOM AOR. We had to figure out how does our system, our CJAD C2P solution, how does it talk to JFN? How does it talk to some of the other things that they're using in that AOR? And so we worked through passing targets, also through the guide exercises and passing an object from the Indo-PACOM AOR into a different AOR and be able to maintain custody of that. All right, and then Sudan Neo, there's another kind of big aha moment. So this is Sudan Neo was, let's see. Date on there. It was 23, so that was in April, May of 23. And you had the 82nd, or the 18th Airborne Corps got called in to solve a problem. It was at the seam of 3 combatant commands. So it was a NEO happening in AFRICOM. They were being evacuated into CENTCOM, into Saudi Arabia. And then you also had assets coming from EUCOM to support, as well as CTAF and USARAF. So it was this confluence of 3. And then the 18th Airborne Corps serving as a de facto JTF. I don't think it was actual JTF, but kind of there to kludge it all together. So when they got to, they did not have a very well-developed COP at AFRICOM for Sudan at the time. EUCOM had a COP. They all had COPs, but the problem was they had multiple COPs. And if you have multiple COPs, you don't really have a COP because you need a common operational picture, not a lot of them so you got to fuse it all together and make sense. So there was good, it was also, I think, a great opportunity for the other COCOMs to see what the 18th Airborne Corps was using, what was in the art of the possible. We could do things like track convoys of evacuees in real time. We could know who was on each vessel as it transited the Red Sea. You could drop down and see what was going on. You could see when they arrived. And so, again, it just accelerated the learning. And then lastly, support to CENTCOM. So right out, finish the Sudan Neo. Things are fine. Peace is breaking out all over the world until October 7th. And then we all know what happened in Israel. And then really everything just kind of blew up there. 18th Airborne Corps was not called to go try and help solve that problem, but General Krill is very much using the Maven Smart System to understand his battle space. This was already 6 to 9 months after that first Scarlet Dragon Oasis exercise, so all 6 components inside of CENTCOM were Maven-centric. Their Mach, the KAOC, the JOCs, they're all running Maven. They could see in real time what was happening in Israel because kind of like we were in Ukraine, we weren't actually on the ground in Israel because that was our policy, but we could still see, we could sense, we could see OPIR, we could see all the different layers, 150 plus different layers on General Kurilla's map in Maven Smart System, all kind of adding some level of understanding, okay? And then being able to run algorithms and set parameters in order to do things that enable decision advantage, because it's not just Israel that's his problem. You've got Iran, the larger problem of Iran. You've got the Iranian-affiliated militia groups, the IAMGs, that are attacking bases in Iraq and Syria. And did I mention the Houthis? The Houthis are causing problems too. We all know what they're doing in the Red Sea with the launching of ballistic missiles. So as a commander, General Kurilla trying to make sense of all this, he needed those tools, CJAT, C2P, in order to execute his mission, and so that he's not constantly calling his commanders, bugging them, asking them what's happening in their AOR, or in their particular AO. 18th Airborne Corps had a small part of that. One, just the continued partnership, but also doing some things with SIGINT layers, doing some things in real-time visibility, and then a small piece of that with the Joint Logistics Over the Sea mission, where we sent the 7th Transportation Brigade there to provide some humanitarian aid. How do you keep track of the aid, the vessels that are pulling into port, the status of the pier? How do you have the chat function with all the commanders? So the learning just continues. But I will tell you, CENTCOM continues to use these tools now in conflict. It's still a very volatile situation, and I don't think they could be fighting as efficiently or as effectively as they are without this tool. But as they say, never let a good crisis go to waste. So next slide, please. Real quickly, just wanted to hit on fighting with live data from a warfighter perspective. So what happens when you don't have a war to fight? And we kind of figured we weren't going to have to do this warfighter because normally something pops up. I don't think the Corps had done one in 3 or 4 years. Well, this time, it didn't. So if you don't have a real war to fight, then you fight a simulated war. And that's how you maintain the edge. That's how you get your reps and sets. And it was a great, very well-resourced by the United States Army, the MCTP, awesome senior mentors, NetCom, people working through all the different challenges. So we're trying to use these tools that we warfight with and that the commander uses on a daily basis, but we're trying to do it with simulated data. Now, I said live data. It's live simulated data, okay? So it's just not quite the same, but it does still put a demand and stress on the networks. And so our G6 is sitting here. She still has bags under her eyes from trying to fight through that and keep us up on comms and keep our tools functioning, all those cloud-based capabilities, because that's how we're used to fighting. So a few sustains, and about 5 sustains, and just a few improves. The first sustain there is data teams, task organized for purpose. So in the time that I left 18th Airborne Corps to the time that I came back, we had received this data talent. These were graduates of the Army Software Factory program or the AI2C program. So the Army making a serious investment in talent in its people in order to upskill them to like coding proficiency. So we took these folks and we task organized them within the directorates, and they got in the platform and they started coding to solve problems in real time. So we didn't have to have an engineer from fill-in-the-blank company do it. These folks could do it there based off the commander's needs. This is a tool that I need to make a decision. And so that is a huge sustain. We also had good support from West Point data scientists, as well as the ORSAs inside of our organization. So that is definitely a sustain. The Fuse Common Operating Picture, it just keeps getting better. Like I said, common intel picture, common operating picture, common sustainment picture. You got to get it all in there on a single pane of glass for the commander to make sense and have understanding and make decisions faster than the adversary. Multiple warfighting function data streams, so getting the APIs to all the databases that we need, the authoritative data sources to be able to do all those things I just talked about. Specifically for this last fight, in-transit visibility. Because in a LISCO fight, and when you're fighting in an away game, you've got to be laser focused on your resupply of people and resupply of ammunition, because if you run out of either one of them, you have to surrender, and that's not an option. So that's what, that was a sustain. We've built out a sustainment workbench organically. There's also the CENTCOM, or the Palantir version, the logistics work. It's all the same. We're trying to develop tools, kind of like we did with a target workbench, which is built specifically for fires to maintain custody of a target from target nomination through prosecution through BDA. We need to be able to do the same with sustainment. We need real-time visibility. We need to see or look across the globe and find out where that next resupply is coming from. What's our maintenance status? What happens if we keep that destroyer out at sea for an additional 30 days in terms of future risk, in terms of future readiness? So really good progress there, but still a lot of work to do. Assessments workbench, I'll say this is kind of a sustain and an improve. So this was another workbench built to kind of be able to do a digital COFM analysis for the commander. So before deciding to attack, take a hill, take a city, do whatever, do the COFMs based off BDA, based off the enemy order of battle, based off the J2s or the G2's intel assessment, GON analysis, OSINT analysis, information analysis, and force structure reporting. All right, then lastly, it's just the cloud-based services for giving us the immediate connection, allow us to use those cloud-based capabilities to fight in a modern way. But you'll see later when I talk about my improves, you can't always depend on that because of the environment that we're operating in now. So there's really 3 improves. The first is BDA. It's not good enough yet. The computer vision's not good enough. We're really good at detecting a tank in the desert. We're pretty good at detecting a tank in Ukraine. We're not so good at detecting a tank that's been hit with a JDAM that's in a bunch of pieces and it's next to a black hole in the ground, or maybe it's on fire. The model hasn't been trained yet to do that. So we just got to continue to think through that, and how we do that through that rapid iteration, working with industry and working with others to get better BDA. Because every single shot matters in a LSCO fight, all right? You're going to run out, if you run, like I said about running out of ammunition, if you're firing at holes in the ground, you're wasting ammunition, and there's an opportunity cost to that. I don't need to talk any more about that. Visualization. All right, how do we, this is very commander-centric, I would argue, because every commander processes data differently. So you got to look at something, what do you need to see in order to make a better decision? Is it a dashboard? Is it a workbench? Is it a flashing light? Is it red, amber, green? That's kind of, but we need the data to be malleable so that we can create these visualizations and tailor them for our commanders at echelon. All right, and then lastly, just the enhanced edge capability. I won't talk too much about cloud, but I know it's important. We like to have it. It allows us to fight distributed, allows us to maintain SA, but in a DDoS environment, you can't count on it. So what do you need? We need edge compute, all right? And you've got to have that resident there. It's expensive. And at what level do you need edge? That's a great conversation to have. I can't answer that question, but there's a lot of people in this room that probably can. All right, let's go to the last slide. Okay. So continuous transformation. I don't need to tell anybody in this room about continuous transformation. This is General George's vision for the force, but it's never ending, all right? You notice upward sloping arrow. We're ascending the mountain. We're moving to the next ridge line. We're getting the reps and sets, all right, doing our calisthenics. And you can see there, it's probably too small to see where you are, but it's a series of exercises. We are, the next Dragon's Lair is next month. We're going to go to UCOM and listen to what soldiers in that AOR, what kind of problems that they have. And while we're there, we're going to talk to their staffs. We're going to talk about interoperability. And we're going to talk about how we can help each other as America's continues to core. So if we meet each other in combat, we have a smooth entrance. Dynamic front exercise I already discussed. Another opportunity to fight a simulated war as a HICOM this time for 10th Mountain Division. So in our last warfighter, the core warfighter, we were training audience, 2 of our down trace units had never used Maven Smart System until we dropped them their licenses less than 30 days prior to the start of the exercise. I would say in most cases it was 2 weeks. And fortunately, because this data platform is relatively intuitive, they were able to figure it out and fight. Well, this will be 10th Mountain Division's opportunity to figure it out and fight, with a lot of people looking over your shoulder telling what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So we look forward to that opportunity. Another Dragon's Lair, support to Project Convergence. We've always supported Project Convergence. We will always look forward to supporting Project Convergence. And then you'll see also the next Scarlet Dragon 25-2, in conjunction with the guide exercise. We'll continue to work that CJAD C2 integration as it works its way through every 90 days, whether we need it or not. And then lastly, at the bottom, just a couple of other things have nothing to do with CJAD C2. You see the sand hills, you see the robots there. That is that's our engineer brigade figuring out how to do a robotic breach. General Rainey said, don't trade blood for first contact. Human-machine integration, figure it out. That's part of that culture. They're engineers. They're tired of watching sappers get blown up in the breach. They're like, let's figure out how to do this with robots. But they're doing it through creative contracting techniques. They're doing it with great support from industry and overhead cover from our Army Modernization Enterprise. That other picture there, that's just to represent the future involvement in Capstone. Dragon's Lair, talked enough about Dragon's Lair, our little Shark Tank innovation. And then that last picture there is a building that's under construction. It's the old Officers Club at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. That is the core innovation outpost. So every division has one, but I mentioned those 7 separate brigades. Now we've got a place where we can all come together. We've got JSOC, we've got USASOC, we've got 3rd ESC. We've got a lot of units there that have soldiers that want to innovate, and we're going to give them a place to do it. So that's what we're doing. That's the 18th Airborne Corps approach. 3 things, okay? It's building that culture, doing your calisthenics, and then capitalizing on those catalysts. And with that, I talked way too long. I'll give you some good questions, okay? But they can only last for 3 minutes and 43 seconds, so I apologize. Over to the booming voice. Thank you. And this will be awkward because when you ask a question, I'm not going to know where to look because I don't know where it's coming from.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
We do have time for a question or two. On its quest to become an AI-enabled corps, can you speak about any challenges the 18th Airborne has experienced in terms of training and trusting its AI ML models and the accuracy of their outputs and how they're being addressed?
Yes, great question. So AI is tricky because models can have hallucinations. There's all kinds of AI ethics and things that we need to be cognizant of. It could lead you to the wrong conclusion. Depending on how the data is input, how that algorithm is working. But the bottom line is that's why we do these very disciplined, it's called 1,000 decisions an hour. And it's our fires element leading, because this has really started with the BAST-T algorithm. But every 90 days, they're testing those algorithms and they change them and they go back to the tech companies and they ask them to retool them, and we provide that feedback. And we literally have people stand over top of our analysts as this thing says, this is a tank. Analyst says, yes, that's a tank. And we work our way through that, and we provide that feedback. So we have a baseline from where we started in 2020, and every 90 days, we have another notch, another baseline to measure to. And every time we get better, but it's still, we can never take that for granted, and we know we always have to have a human in the loop, okay? And people talk about human in the loop, on the loop. Everything we're doing right now has a human in the loop, just to be that override if the AI starts to stray. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll do one more question for you. Can you talk at all about the core data warfare company? Are you trying to grow it? What skills do you need, and what have they achieved so far?
Great question. We don't have a core data warfare company anymore. So Chief's guidance was not to have provisional units. So we don't have money to innovate. We don't have RDT&E. We don't have structure to innovate. We need to innovate organically. And so when I talked about those graduates from Army Software Factory, AI2C, we are putting them into the directorates where they can solve problems. Now, we can task organize for purpose, but that's different from having a separate company with a company commander. That was a good idea to bring awareness, to kind of put them together, let them build that synergy amongst each other as they would work on coding solutions, but we're not doing a data warfare company per se anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was our final question. Please welcome Mike Black back to the stage.
Well, thank you, General Cogbill, for joining us today and giving us the 18th Airborne Corps journey to CJADC2 -P. We learned about culture. We learned about those reps and sets, the calisthenics, and we learned about that accelerant and catalyst. And I just appreciate you taking us through the Corps' perspective on that. And also, finally, we learned that AI is tricky, all right? So in lieu of a speaker gift, AFCEA will make a donation to the Signal and Cyber Corps Historical Museum on your behalf, sir. Now, before we move to the next presentation, just want to quickly highlight 2 things. A couple sessions that we have coming up. First, beginning at 2:15 in Lamar, BNC, the Cyber School, will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Cyber Branch and recognizing the 2024 class of distinguished and honorary members of the Corps. The final session this afternoon will be the AFCEA Idea panel, leveraging inclusivity in cybersecurity, which will be followed by a reception in the Riverwalk hallway. That panel will begin around 3:30, and both the panel and the reception have been sponsored by Sienna and Red River. We're going to transition here in the next 15 minutes to our final session from ASALT. So just join us as we prepare that room for the session that will begin in about 15 minutes from now. So thank you.